project and program.
You're live.
This is Senate Transportation Committee. We are looking at February 4th, and we are talking about the miscellaneous DMV bill and specifically section 5 to start. And I think, Greg, you're first. And then the two. And for all of you, please introduce yourself and tell us who you represent as you start. Thank you.
Marlene Petit, Executive Director of Finance for the Department of Corrections.
Linda Ladd, Financial Director for the Department of Corrections.
And Greg?
Greg Young. I am the Vocational Outreach Program Manager, and I also oversee Vermont Correctional Industries license plate production.
Thank you. And I've been told by Megan that Greg, you're first.
Okay. Haley sent out a handout last night about how our license plates are produced. I'm just going to go real quickly over. We've been producing the license plates for DMV since 1999. Every plate, with the exception of the last round of Vermont Strong plates, was produced by Vermont Correctional Industries. The production is done at Northwest State Correctional Facility with using up to 11 incarcerated folks. We have standardized the process so that we're following the Department of Labor standard occupational codes. So we actually have task conditions and standards that they need to sign off on for them to be fully qualified to work in the shop. We pay anywhere from 25 cents to $1.25 an hour, but we do have the unique thing about Vermont Correctional Industries is that we have a match savings program. So for every dollar that incarcerated individual saves in the special match savings program, the department will match $1 up to $4,000. So somebody that stays with us for a while could leave with $8,000 in their pocket if they choose to save. So the 25 to $1.25, actually, if they saved 100%, would be 50 cents to $2.50 an hour, up to $4,000. We have two DOC staff that oversee the shop. I'm actually in the shop today because one of our staff is on the road, so I'm helping cover the shop. And we only have the one contract with DMV, and we have a contract with 3M, which actually owns part of our blanking line where the I'm going to call them stickers, but it's the material that goes onto the aluminum that says Vermont Green Mountain State on it. 3M actually owns that piece of equipment, and we just lease that equipment from them, and it comes along with a price of the roll of graphic that we get.
For those of you who want to know what that blinking line looks like, it's in this photo right here.
The whole process of it is we put in a roll of raw aluminum that we buy at about 60,000 pounds. The minimum purchase is 60,000 pounds. We buy anywhere from 80 to 120,000 pounds a year. So that goes through there. It goes through a hot tank to take off any oil. Then the sheeting is applied to it, which is the sticker that says Green Mountain State on it. It comes out in the shape of a license plate, and then we send it through our debossing press, which presses the numbers into it. And then it goes through an inking so that any the white part that's in the middle gets green in the high areas that it's supposed to. Then it goes into an oven for about 20 minutes at 200 degrees. Then once it comes out of the oven, it cools for about 20 minutes. And then our incarcerated individuals go through it, make sure that they meet the standards. Then they box it up and they get it ready for shipment. Is there any questions there? Last year, we made about 500,000 individual plates. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, we're going to have questions at the end. I'm going to let finish your presentation and then we'll take questions.
Sure. So we made about 500,000 plates last calendar year. 200,000 of those were being the single plates where it was only one. We only had to replace one portion, or the state only requires one plate to be on. Our biggest deal is the pairs of plates, which I believe is what DMV is talking about, making everything just a single plate. So we made about 300,000 pair of those. Last year's gross revenue was 790,000 plus or minus. Our net revenue was 187,000, and then our cash balance ended up being 119. So the impacts of going to one plate for us is we just bought all of our raw material. So that's the aluminum, the 3M stickers that go on top of it, and the envelopes that the plates go into, the brown envelopes that everybody sees. So if we went to single plate, it would be FY28 before we'd have to buy any more of that because of the stock that we have on hand. The production process is exactly the same for 2 plates as it is 1 plate. Our debossing press can press 2 plates at a time. It also can press 1. So there really is no savings for the Department of Motor Vehicles because we still have to use an envelope. We still use the raw aluminum just at half. We still use the stickers at half, but we still have that 20-minute bake cycle that goes into the oven, and we still have 20 minutes of cool down. We still have to quality control when they initially come off the blanking line. There's a quality control. Some of them don't even make it to that point. And then once they get pressed and inked and cooled, there's another quality control inspection that needs to be done. And then they get put in the envelopes and the boxes for distribution. The production process doesn't change at all for 1 to 2 plates.
So you have more screenings or?
I'm sorry, what was that, sir?
We're itching to ask questions.
Absolutely, I'm ready for them. The financial questions will go to Linda or Marlene will take care of the financial questions. Any production questions, I can field those for you.
Wendy first, and then I've got a bunch.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. Thank you very much for being here. It's really helpful to understand this, because I wasn't even sure that corrections still did it.
Do you, let me break in, do you ever take visitors to see?
You can.
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you ever take visitors?
Absolutely. We love to have visitors come into the shop. And matter of fact, there was a group of visitors that walked in behind me while I was on this call, and I apologize for that.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, I'd like to see it too. So, thank you. So the material that you get from 3M, is it?
Yes.
Not just the plastic, not the aluminum. The aluminum you buy. Okay, so
The
you buy.
aluminum, it goes out to bid, and whatever the rate is for that time is what we have to pay for it.
Okay, and it's great to hear about the matching in the incarcerated folks' account, because I'm chair of institutions and we handle corrections now, and so we hear a lot about just the importance of finding ways to get skills while you're there, and just the financial issues too, because there are a lot of things that they have to pay for. You probably know in the facilities. So how many folks get a substantial amount of, this might be a question for you, have actually money in their account? Because the the pay per hour is still very low. It's what, it's dollar, somewhere $1 an hour, that's it.
$1.25 an hour is the max.
Yeah, so would you, so I guess I'm curious to know what is the average hourly? Because the facility rates are when they work in the like in the kitchen, for example, that's $5 a day roughly, or that's in the range. So I'm just curious about how this relates to that. Because definitely the matching is a good thing. It sounds like the matching doesn't happen in the
Facility,
facility.
it does not.
Okay, so and I can get that later because that's not exactly a transportation.
Yeah. Correct. Okay, we can definitely.
Okay, but it
provide
is,
that information.
but I do want to come in to see it.
If you can have them in institution.
Oh, no, I will. Yeah, we took better things.
Yeah, I just said,
Go ahead.
yeah. So you've said it, I think once that it wouldn't change your process to go from
Okay.
2 plates to 1 plate,
Correct.
stating it correctly. But you would have a reduction in your revenue is my assumption. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to that. And I appreciate the information about 2 plates to 1 plate, and that it wouldn't change your process. That was a really key question that I had. So thank you for already answering it.
Sure. So, right now, DMV pays, let me look at my sheets here. It's, for a pair of auto plates, which are the most ones that we sell, it's $6.98 for a pair of plates. We sell a single plate for $4.28. And the reason for that, it's only a $2.27 savings. And that's because we still have the use of the envelope. We still have the box. We still have the labor that goes into it, the ink and the pressing. So we're only really saving one of the stickers, which is about $2.20 a piece, and 7 cents worth of aluminum. That was the last price of aluminum was, it's about 0.024 cents a pound. So it's like 7 cents.
Wow, you really are, you got the nickels and the dimes,
Yeah,
and the pennies, and I really appreciate that. That's helpful to know that the cost of 1 license plate is greater, like the individual cost of 1 is greater than like half of 2. Just to say that out loud.
It is, yes.
So that, because of the labor, so it sounds like you wouldn't necessarily see a dip in the revenue going to the program, if I'm understanding correctly, because you're not giving like I guess you are giving a discount for the 2 plates essentially in a way. So you're not going to see a dramatic, I'm just thinking about that $118,000 that you had as your final, that you get as your revenue. You wouldn't see a sharp decrease in that.
I'm going to let Marlene and Lyndon discuss that one because it is a very complicated financial system on how it works. So they are much better versed at that than I am.
So you're not going to see 50% less revenue, but you're going to see, we're estimating 200,000 to 300,000 less revenue,
Oh,
Gross revenue.
gross revenue,
okay.
not
So,
net.
so instead of your close to 800,000, drop that anywhere from 200,000 to 300,000 gross. So your 118 net is definitely going to be less because you've taken a significant hit, yet your cost for that aluminum when you buy it and the cost for that minimum number of sheeting, that's not going to change whether you get 1 plate or 2 plates sold. And that's the hard part, is there are minimum quantities that we have to purchase when we do go out to purchase. So when we purchase what they call the Legend, the Vermont Legend that has the Vermont in the green.
Like,
Yes, when we purchase that specific, that's the sheeting that overlays on top of the aluminum. The minimum number of rolls that we can buy is 40 rolls at a time. And they're roughly $1,300 a roll. And so if you're buying 1 plate, that's going to sit on the shelf longer than it currently does because of the production being mostly 2 pairs of plates. The other piece is when you're buying aluminum, it does have to go out to bid, but we do watch, the commodities market. You have to watch the commodity market. What's happening to aluminum?
Yeah.
And that's going to affect our cost. The last time we purchased the 60,000 pounds, it was well over $3 a pound.
Oh, goodness.
So that's a hit of 180 some odd $1,000 to our balance sheet right off the bat. So if we're not using it, it's kind of sitting there, not making any money.
Yeah.
So there's that whole timing and that kind of financial issue. So it would be very unfortunate if the net result of that change ends up where the cash balance is in the negative at the end of a fiscal year, which we just went through with the legislature last year to ensure them that that will never happen again.
Oh,
So I'm very aware of if something of that were to happen, then we'd have to really have another conversation with the
The intent
legislature.
is to break even.
Right.
yeah.
Not to be in a deficit position, because as Linda mentioned, the legislature had to fill a whole gap there. We don't want to do that again.
Well, this is really helpful because I think we've been kind of pitched this transition for 2 plays to 1 as a cost savings overall for the DMV, but it sounds like you're actually potentially at the DOC going to be experiencing potentially a loss or a deficit. So
Could.
it would,
We're not sure.
you're not sure.
Not
Okay.
sure.
I
But we know
think-
we'll have a loss of gross revenue.
Oh, great point. But that does make me more I did not expect that. That's information that I had not fully thought through. So it does make me a little more apprehensive for the 2 plate to 1 plate move. But you're really watching the numbers. So if you get new information or if you're able to come to an agreement with DMV or something to make sure that you don't end up in a deficit, can they? I just don't want you to end up in a deficit for this situation. So even if we do move to 1 plate, I think that's a serious conversation we have to have. Because I would hate for DOC to basically be experiencing negatives for a move that's actually benefiting the DMV coffers. So that's just a thought. So thank you.
So I'm gonna switch gears here a little. And it was mentioned earlier that when we did the Vermont Strong Plate, that was not done in-house with corrections. Why was that?
So when the first iteration of Vermont Strong came out, we had the sign shop that Linda was talking about earlier. We had a sign shop where we had almost 30 additional incarcerated individuals that were working up there. So we could lay the signs a lot faster. So what we would do is we would just run the plates through the blanking line at our plate shop, box them up and send them up to Newport where they would apply the Vermont Strong sticker. This second round of Vermont Strong plates, we didn't have that shop. So we only had the up to 11 incarcerated individuals at Northwest. And we were just barely keeping production. And the request was for, it was for a lot of plates in a short amount of time that we had to turn them around, and we were not able to do that. We would not have been able to meet the production time frame.
So let me ask this question because this is not an easy, if the front plate went away and there is some movement, is there capacity to do a limited number of front of something else? Would there be capacity to do that? We have a bill on our wall that says Vermont Green. Would corrections be in a position where sometime in the future they might be able to print not a huge number, but some in some capacity do something like a Vermont Strong Plate?
Very limited production with our current production process. There is a process out there that we could do that in a high production capacity. But as of what we have right now, we would be very limited on the number that we could produce in a certain amount of time.
Go ahead, Pat.
Well, what would that be? You know, ballpark.
To purchase the new equipment to be able to do that?
No, to get a plate out, a certain number of plates out within a certain time frame.
Because we use 3M material, all of the design and process has to go through them because it's their material. And their process is about 3 to 4 months from the time it's designed until it's approved by the Department of Motor Vehicles. It takes about 3 to 4 months because it goes back and forth to Texas a few times. Once it gets approved, we could probably make 200 plates in a week, 200 of these special plates in a week.
Okay.
But that would be after it went through the whole entire approval process.
Right.
We're probably gonna have to go further in this, but this sounds like is maybe yes. And not, there's no definite to this, but it doesn't come without Europe, and we might be interested in talking about that and what the process is. And it would depend on whether you could get stuff from 3M.
Correct. It would be their design team that works with whoever. So if Vermont Green wanted plates, they would work with 3M, get the design they wanted to. That would go to DMV, get their approval to go on the road, and then it would come back to us.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to follow up on that, would the cost be more per unit because you'd have fewer units?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, so it'd be good to know that number. And if we do the soccer plates, there may be other plates that folks want. So
Well,
there might be
I
capacity issues on that.
I think what we're hearing here, it's limited capacity.
Yeah.
So if he wanted to move in that direction, it would be nice to know what's doable. What would be doable in this price? And if it doesn't happen here, who did the Vermont Strong second printing?
I believe it was.
I believe that was done out of Canada.
It was done out of Canada.
Yes.
Does anybody know anybody from that was in the middle of the production of the Vermont Strong plates? Is there anybody still around?
Of the first iteration of Vermont Strong, yes, there is.
Yeah.
And who would we talk to get information about that? You don't have to answer that right now.
I'm going to have to think on that for a minute.
And it would be helpful to us if we could better understand what your capacity might be.
Okay.
And any estimate. And if I went home when Joan says she wants a job done by some contractor, she said, always give me the high level of the most expensive it could be, some idea of what on a limited basis, if we said there was going to be a couple of specialty plates, if you did have the capacity and what that might look like.
Okay. We can do that.
Because if we're going to consider doing away with the front plates and there was any capacity, that might answer the question of DLC losing any money if we could do that.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would be nice to talk to somebody that did the Vermont Strong so we could understand what the capacity to go out of state or somebody else that would do it. and what they did.
Okay.
Because they apparently had experience both in-house and out-of-house.
Sure.
Greg, this is Marlene.
Yes.
I have a question since I'm newer to this process. Our license plate production is the raised letters on the license, right?
Debossed,
The debug. Did
debossed.
the Canadian shop for the Vermont Strong, were they debossed or were they?
No.
flat?
They were flat plates. And even the first iteration of Vermont Strong was flat plates.
So since you asked the question, what does that mean to somebody that doesn't understand anything?
Well, and I'm new to this, so I think it means that the flat plates are less expensive to make. Is that?
Flat plates, it's just the design of the sheeting just goes on the aluminum. There's no pressing at all involved with a flat plate. When you go to our standard plates that we currently use for vehicles, they're pushed in. And my understanding, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we are the only state that pushes them in instead of pushes them out.
Correct.
Am I-
We are the only state that debosses our plates. Other states either emboss or go with a flat plate.
And the flat plates are much less resilient. Like it seems like when in other states that just the printing of it can just come off and then it just looks like a flat piece of metal, where if you have the emboss or deboss, then you're at least going to see that.
The impression.
Correct. Correct.
Debossed is out and embossed is
In.
or twice.
Deboss is in. So they press the
Deboss.
numbers into the top of the plate. Emboss is they press the numbers in from the bottom of the plate. We press them down from the top of the plate.
Okay, I'm there.
So they're both-
looking at their
yeah.
plate. Oh.
So they're both raised. It's just, so
Figure
that,
how they do it.
yeah, and it's just,
So that's
but
it.
for security, it's
That's
better.
Deboss.
That is the
Yeah.
deboss.
That makes, it explains why they're so, yeah, okay. Oh, I see. That's cool. I guess I never thought about that.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah. None of us know much about this.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll keep that.
Don't have sample on your car.
Well, it really would be helpful if we could get some information. Do you have capacity?
Sure.
Under different scenarios, what might be the cost and estimate? What would it take to gear up? How long would it take you to gear up?
Okay.
Give us some idea if we took this move and it was a reduction of, you know, 200,000 or 300,000 in revenue, would some limited capacity for limited production of specialty plates be possible?
Okay. I can look into that. I can get those answers to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we missing anything? And when's a good time to visit?
You just work through Haley on that and we will open our doors for you anytime. But Haley can work through the details on that.
Yeah, I think it would be, you know, we don't do a lot of field trips here, but you know, we might,
It's an experience. Everybody should see at least how plates are made one time.
Yes.
well, a lot of what we do has to do with your license plates, so
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you all for coming today.
Okay. Thank you.
If you could contact Megan, as you know, we're approaching a time frame where we've got crossover, and I'm gonna say that the members of committee, we've got 18 days left for the crossover
Okay.
for us, so we're a little bit in a tight time frame to get some solid numbers to help our thinking.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
I know.
I know.
D bus, M bus is flat, is that?
But the EMBA, what could we even tell if we had one of you?
No, we did not. I mean, you can tell.
Right, but
Yeah, it goes in and
yeah, but I mean, the functionally, everything, you know what I mean? They're, yeah, but it's.
See, now I'm an exceptionalist about
Yeah.
the
You're trying to, well, I'm not gonna be okay.
No, blame my spirit.
No pressure.
I thought, yeah, I just thought they were winning themselves away from it.
Yeah, I think it's what.
I thought so too. Well, the Windsor one is, that's what I saw. And, yeah, yeah, well, kind of, most
To
of
be out there one day.
yeah, we should talk.
Well,
That's all.
Yeah.
I never realized that, I never realized in this that a savings in our budget is.
Yeah.
Well,
That was the light, that's what the light bulb was for me.
yeah, I think honestly, well, that's a appropriations thing, probably. But
We
it,
have four
well,
plates. and
no, yeah,
But
You get a mini souvenir plate actually.
no, but I think we should have a policy that one, that if we do want one fund to subsidize another fund, we do it consciously.
Yeah.
well,
But yeah.
we're trying to, but I would say if they could say they could do 2 or 3 specialty plates and it made up the whole.
Yeah,
All of these things bump up against each
Right.
other.
right.
Are you ready?
Wait.
You're a little slow this morning.
Didn't want to connect and mess up their testimony, so.
Well, they did pretty good and, let's see how you do.
Oh my God.
Pressure's on.
You're so friendly to you in house transportation.
I know, that's like the Lions did.
Anytime.
Okay.
We're just sitting here twiddling our thumbs for you.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair and committee members. Jeremy Reed, Chief Engineer, Agency of Transportation, and I'm here presenting on 2 reports that were submitted this past January, and they were compelled by last year's key bill out of this committee. I'm going to just combine the 2 reports into one presentation and go through it that way. So the first one is section 16 out of Act 43 of 2025 that in effect had 2 objectives: to evaluate the state's town highway aid and grant programs to look for any sort of efficiencies, and to evaluate the various funding streams administered through the agency's Municipal Assistance Bureau. So there's, and as you'll see in later slides, a plethora of various avenues for funding for towns. So as I just alluded to, here are the various funding sources. You've got a number within the Municipal Assistance Program, and those are generally grant programs. Within the Finance Administration Division, you have the Direct Aid Program. Within District Maintenance and Fleet, there are a number of grant programs. And then within Planning, there's Better Connections Grant Program And just for terminology, when we say grant, that is an indication that there's process involved in that the municipality has to apply for a grant, and then somebody, generally at VTrans, then makes a decision on awarding those grants. You'll also see that the funding source is split between state only and state and federal funds. Obviously, as we've discussed previously, there comes strings with those federal funds. So we are somewhat limited in what we can do on the federal fund side. So some of the key findings are that municipalities have limited resources. I think we can acknowledge that various municipalities have different levels of sophistication and general apparatus to administer these types of programs. And this is particularly relevant on the federal side, just because of the strings that are attached. You need to check all the boxes for federal funds. Additionally, frequent turnover with small towns causes problems because you lose that knowledge on a fairly regular basis. Therefore, compounding, sort of that problem. Transparency. So it was acknowledged that there is some programs that are very transparent and obvious, and others are a little bit less so. And so the finding there is that it's not a blanket finding that we need to be more transparent, that we need to be more consistently transparent.
We say we mean
VTrans.
you mean the municipality.
Generally, VTrans that was targeted at.
Do you want questions as you go along, right?
Whatever the pleasure.
Go ahead.
So, does transparency include a good amount of notice so that when programs are open, the town has more than 30 days to respond?
That wasn't necessarily highlighted, but I think transparency is all of the above. So it's how does the grant get awarded? Is it clear to the towns that there is a notice of funding opportunity? What is the evaluation criteria? What are the expectations for that grant award? So it's all of the above. It's not specific to any one concern or one component.
Okay, I guess, so then I just need to say, because I think I did say it last year, that is a barrier.
Mhm.
It's really hard when you only have that amount of time, because with small towns and even medium towns, the select board is gonna want to see it twice. And so some only meet once a month, so you need a program. They need the application period to be longer than a month.
Fair enough. The report authors also looked at what some of our neighboring states have done, principally Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. And the key findings of that are that a formula-driven process eases the administrative burden, right? So as I discussed, aid is kind of direct. There's not a very heavy bureaucratic process, whereas the grants, there's a notice of funding opportunity that may have to apply, then we evaluate, and then we award the grant. So they did notice that there was certainly efficiency on the direct aid versus the grant programs. Now, that would be limited to state-funded programs because we can't give aid from federal funds. There is also a downside that if towns do not use the aid in the manner that we would want, there isn't that backstop. So prime example of that would be like a structures grant out of district maintenance and fleets. If we converted all that money to direct aid and they did not establish a capital reserve fund and took a portion of that on an annual basis, there would not be a grant program when they had an issue with a bridge to receive a one-time $100,000 grant award. So they would need to have the fiscal discipline to take that money on an annual basis, let it accrue, and then do the required work. So what you gain in efficiency has the offset of basically a necessity and fiscal discipline. So some of the recommendations to try to make the whole process more efficient is a singular webpage for all municipal funding opportunities.
Oh.
And, perhaps a cloud-based application that in some way could address all of those. Again, we're a little bit limited with once we introduce federal funds as far as the content of that. But that was one of the ideas. A training series intended to improve municipalities' understanding of the funding requirements and expectations
Is that a training series for the application?
for the program in general, right? So not only the application, but what are the requirements by America? Some sort of timeliness, what are the documentation requirements?
So I used to do grant writing for our fire department and the federal, firefighter grant or whatever. I can't remember the name, but they had really good training. So like, if you're going to apply, do this 1 hour webinar.
Sure.
It was really helpful. So you did an application correctly instead of going back and forth or not getting funding because you didn't fill it out correctly. Or I think they would also say, like, be aware if you get this money, you're going to have to do by America,
Right.
like that. But and it didn't seem like it was the federal government. So they did whole country. But if there could be something like that, like little webinars, like
Yep.
are the key things.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what this is
Yeah.
pointing to. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Didn't we have staff at one time, maybe it was during, I don't know if it was pre-COVID or what, a couple staff that would go into towns and help them do grant, through the grant process?
Yeah, MPAPs and I think ACCD. So I don't know.
We don't do that anymore?
I don't know.
Oh,
Yes,
I don't.
they're still there. I think they have money. Yeah, they're running out of money, but
okay.
I think it was to help them for all grants. Could
Yeah.
be transportation and other federal.
Yeah, so I think that's an ACCD program. Another recommendation is to make the commitments and risks more transparent, and this really ties into the next report. If a town in good faith, but somewhat uninformed, walks into a grant and then after the fact realizes what they signed up for, then they have to cancel it. That introduces a lot of inefficiency. Whereas if we made those commitments and risks better known up front, in theory, there would be some efficiency savings. And I mentioned already the transparency piece amongst, or the consistency and transparency amongst all the programs and what we or how we operate.
That's PM means programs.
Project managers, excuse me. Right. So you've got municipal assistance program has municipal project managers, and then within district maintenance and fleet, you've got district project managers that have help them with those grant programs as well.
I don't really understand what specifically you're talking about when you're saying transparency. Transparency means like program requirements.
And how exactly how it's worded. So all of the above, right? So it's how the program works, what the expectations are of the program. For the aid, exactly how do we calculate and award aid? What is that calculus? Does every town get the same? I think the statute, and I'll just paraphrase here, basically says that the district transportation administrator has to equitably distribute the funds. But again, because it's sort of a rolling average, one town may get something one year and then fall a third of the way down the list, whereas if they got a bigger award, they fall all the way down the list. So just being more consistent in our transparency.
That's within the district.
Correct. Right. So in theory, you've got 9 districts and 5 DTAs. So I think they were just looking that we were consistently transparent. And this was derived from feedback from RPCs and VLCTs. So I think that's where the consistency piece is. I think some RPCs reported, yeah, we've got, great service. We know exactly how this runs. And I think other RPCs or VLCTs said, well, we're not entirely sure.
Right. I think that changes when you get program managers maybe, or the district. I can't remember if there's what the name of the person is that works in the towns in the district.
Yeah, district project manager and district
That
tax.
changes. I know when I was on the select board, we would get a new one and I was like, well, this is totally different.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we all do things differently and have different strengths, and I think that's just the nature of having 9 districts. And so,
Chair, we need our district map to be displayed.
Oh, yeah, and we have it. It's very large.
I'm pro this.
Now, why don't you, Vanna, go over it?
So that's the high level summary of the first report.
Can I just ask a question? Is the first report the title is municipal,
It's, I don't know exactly what the title is,
it's like
but
the
it's,
payback.
no,
or something.
no, that's the efficiencies. So the first report, section 16 is,
Grant efficiency.
That's the
Yeah.
efficiency report.
Yeah.
So that's what you're giving us now.
so that's what I just did, was
Can I-
the efficiency report.
Can we just go back to the slide that says municipal funding
Sure.
pathways? You said some of these are automatic and some are not, and I'm
Correct.
trying to figure out, so the town highway structures program, that doesn't have. There was the key word was fed.
So the,
aid.
yeah, so the keyword is aid versus grant. And so, and I see some of these don't necessarily say grant, but town highway aid, for instance, is a direct formulaic based on the mileage certificate.
Yes,
Each town gets that on a quarterly basis. There's no application, very low level of bureaucracy.
right,
You know, you just get it.
right, which is actually great,
Yeah, I think everyone.
and it's a good amount of funding.
Which is, how much a mile are they getting this year?
I don't know that off the top of my head. It varies depending on the class, right? So you get,
Well,
Class
by class, what are they getting on?
I don't know, I can work with Ernie to provide that.
Well, and I know that, the agency's done well to keep up with their formula and what it is. It's. And this is a technical term from the chair, tuning for men.
We met this. Yeah. I'll
I
just-
don't mean to.
No, I understood.
Yeah,
And I'll just say, you know, in the FY 27 budget, we matched the statutory required amount.
I already said that.
Okay.
I knew what, so you were gonna say.
I don't even need to be here.
No, we love having you here. But
so that's automatic, the
Right.
town highway aid.
Yeah. Municipal grants and aid program is automatic.
Yeah, it's
I think, yeah, so I
Yeah,
think,
it would be helpful to know.
right, so like the municipal grants and aid, I think you just need to submit a letter of intent and you get it automatically. And because they have a fixed amount, they have to wait, understand, because again, there are some program requirements for that. So they just need to wait for the towns to say, yes, we've got qualifying work we will do.
Okay,
go ahead.
And I just want to point out, like, one thing we're kind of missing here is that there's no dedicated formula funds for improvements to bike and pedestrian. Is my understanding. The only way you can get funding as a community is through a grants program.
Correct.
So I just want to highlight that. I wish this study had included the differences between access to certain programs and fixed money that people are getting. Because I think what we've seen is that's a policy choice. Is the towns that can get the fixed formula funds are going to not necessarily be the same towns that are going to be able to apply for a bike and pedestrian grant program. So we just see this continued where they're not doing grants, they're not able to fill them out. They're whether or not staff time or like interest and ability. And so they're just doing the basic, what they're getting in town highway aid fund, and they're not doing pedestrian safety measures in the same way with sidewalks or bike safety. So I do think there's also a clear policy choice in the way we've delineated the funding for towns where their small towns are having an inability to access complete streets programs, for example. So I just want to call that out because I was surprised it wasn't a finding in here. And then I also wanted to point out that my understanding is you are prioritized within your grant applications for better roads, for example, depending on how you've zoned your community right now. And I don't know what's happening with 181, but what I've heard is Hartford, because we have a designated downtown, we get higher on the list when it comes to applying for grants. So I'm wondering, did you look at how some of our other laws are affecting who's getting prioritized within the grant application process? Because that's confusing.
Yeah, so the scope of the report wasn't to do a deep dive into the, details and administration of each grant program or each aid program. It was just as a collective, pot of money.
Yeah.
Is there a way to run it in aggregate more efficiently?
Okay, if I remember, I'm gonna have to look back at our wording because I think the term efficiency that you're using is maybe overstating, I think, what I was hoping to see from the report. At least when we wrote it, I was hoping to see how we could better, not necessarily even, yes, efficiently use our dollars, but also support communities and I guess that wording didn't translate into what was actually. So that's a bummer for my part. I missed that I wanted to hear more about how we can support the towns better with what we have. And maybe that means efficiency
Mhm.
in that word, but it's not translating what we got, so.
Go ahead.
So before we go to the next report, because we're finished,
Correct.
here, I guess two things. I can't find it on our website, so that's a
Oh.
Megan thing. So I'm sure it's there. No, I'm sure it's there. It's just, I don't know which one it is. Is V-Trans going to do anything differently based on this report?
So we're still evaluating the recommendations and, we'll have to look at what any of the recommendations would cost or resources to implement. At this time, we're not proposing anything. We're just evaluating at this point.
So I would think that most of the things that you would do would be internal. I mean, they would be policy things that you wouldn't necessarily need you don't need legislation to do most of these things.
I don't know about most or some,
Or
but
some.
yeah, I mean, some of them we would definitely need legislation for. Some of them we could certainly do, right? We could build a single website without legislative approval. If we wanted to take the money that's traditionally going to a grant program, whether it be a class 2 paving program or a structures program, and turn it into formulaic aid, we would need legislative approval for that.
Okay, but you wouldn't need approval to have to give the towns more time to respond.
Correct.
That's,
I think that's true.
yeah. So I'm still gonna advocate for
Okay.
that. Thank you.
And I think Joel is probably going to come in at some point and he can talk specifically to the municipal assistance grants, and certainly we can have somebody come in to Senator White's question about the Better Connections grant and discuss the details of those programs.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I thought we put in place all this stuff so that you would get, like, this list is only really truly available for certain towns. Like, this full list is my understanding.
No,
Because,
that's
well,
not
I mean, you can apply.
Right.
But you get higher priority based on certain planning and zoning decisions your community has made, which are more accessible to communities with larger staffs. For example, like, I know Hartford is almost always getting these grant programs because we have like 5 people who can do it and we have a cohesive DPW staff.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean, so just having it be available isn't the same as people actually being equally able to access it. So I guess I misunderstood the point of this because I thought that was like.
And that's the nature of any grant program. And that was part of the challenges identified with the key findings, is that various municipal capabilities and capacities will definitely impact
Yeah.
the ability to continuously or consistently submit well-written, well thought out grants. I mean, that's.
But I'm saying even if you do submit one, you're still less likely to get it than other communities based on how we've set up priorities.
Yeah,
within those programs.
I don't know the scoring.
Which is what I thought was the point of what we were doing before, was we want towns to have smart growth. So you get better access to grant money based on those things.
Mhm.
But I guess that's beyond the point. I appreciate your time.
No,
And thank you for the work.
In the roads, there's the whole.
yeah, and just to, if I can talk to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just,
You guys are talking back and forth. I was,
yeah, well.
We're both, and I was thinking it's our big.
Yeah. Just, some of the requirements are legislative requirements.
Yes.
And that's okay. And I think that is our purview, and that we should look at those and update them periodically and understand if they're working. But then others are just, ways that the system could be, really improved. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. And it's not all just V-Trans. It's towns also, and it's, regional commissions. But if we could have a good idea of what levers to press on those, I think it would be helpful. And
Yeah.
maybe the full report has that.
Yeah.
Just haven't seen.
I mean, I'm doing a high level presentation.
Yeah.
I will say in general, a lot of these grant programs are, and I think this, to your point, Senator, is they were targeted for very specific
Yes.
tasks. And so if communities aren't invested in those very specific tasks, then yeah, they're going to be less likely to get a grant for that specific initiative, right? It isn't meant to be, there isn't meant to be parity across the state on the amount of money you receive. I think a lot of these grant programs, whether at the state or federal level, were designed to support specific initiatives that towns had either an interest or capability to pursue.
Yeah, and I think the point I'm trying to make is like, I don't think Hartford is more pro Bike Lanes than every other community in Windsor County, but because we spent years putting it in our town plan, we get that money. And so we become a place where people can bike. And then unfortunately, the surrounding communities are not able to get access to that money. So I guess that's my point is, but I hear what you're saying. It's like, we did all the work, so I understand why, but it does create like these interesting, corridor deserts of support for some of these programs.
Yep.
Can I ask one other just question, because it came up in the news yesterday? So apparently there's now a push by multiple municipalities to no longer maintain roads, to release their ownership of roads,
Okay.
give it back. And I'm wondering if that came up at all with the town highway aid discussion, if you were seeing communities prior. It was like
Yeah.
I was surprised to see that. That's a tactic that towns have taken when they say, we're just not getting enough money, so we're gonna maintain fewer roads.
Yep.
Did you hear that at all?
I don't know the story you're referencing.
Okay.
I will say disinvestment is something that's gaining popularity nationally.
Hmm.
I think there should be, with limited resources, some look at how much value does that road have, right? And I mean, chairman of the local select board here, I get it, right? If it's a class 3 with one house, should it be a class 4 or a legal trail, right? I think that level of consideration is something we would support, just because we need to do that as well. I mean, I think last year you posed the question, do we pave too much?
Yeah.
Right? So that's something, disinvestment is something we need to look at, not only at the state level, but the town level.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. I think it was Morrisville, but it might have been Morristown, so I don't wanna, I don't.
They're one and the same.
Okay, I don't know which one's the municipality, but I guess the municipality is considering. Did you call it disinvestment?
Yeah.
I think that is another question, is are we truly not giving enough money to meet the needs now? So people are pulling back, and what does that cause? So,
And when we talk about that, let's also talk about, there are some towns who want to take over state roads, mostly because of the ability to regulate what happens on the roads more than the paving. They're not eager to pay for the paving.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, St. Albans
But
Town,
that's a whole conversation.
yeah, I mean, St. Albans Town last year, right? They took over, so.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, lost where I'm at. Here, okay. All the questions answered for the efficiency?
now.
Okay, happy to address anything later. So the second was, and I think we were in here with some testimony last year, trying to understand what is a good approach for some of the payback provisions. And this really stems from IIJA. So pre-IIJA, the payback provisions were very clear. There was consistency between our grant agreements, state statute, and the federal CFR. IIJA relaxed some of the payback provisions. And so this report is, in effect, trying to help us get to a place that provides transparency and consistency for those payback provisions. So again, same sort of format. I'll discuss some of the key findings and then the recommendations. So currently, there's some ambiguity and or inconsistency between the payback provisions in the state statute, the grant agreements that we actually execute, and potentially the CFR. Again, process challenges for municipalities, especially as we discussed, smaller towns that either are less sophisticated or just have less resources in general, especially on the federal side. And that's principally what we're talking about is those programs that have federal money. Understanding the administrative burden that comes with that money and, some of the just project risks, because typically these are a little bit bigger projects, and understanding those project risks when you apply for the grant is one of the findings. Some of the other program findings is that if projects languish and then ultimately get canceled, there's a significant program inefficiency in that, because essentially those funds are encumbered. And, if Town A, for instance, sits on a project and can't pursue it for any number of reasons, that means Town B doesn't get those funding or that funding. So, certainly there's that identified issue. The consensus is not there yet on what we want to do as far as what the payback provisions are. What was identified is that we do need to have a consensus, and there needs to be very clear milestones on what the payback provision will be. And then there will need to be supported education and transparency on that, so that towns can walk into a grant application fully understanding what they're signing up for, and not have the ambiguity of legalese rule the day, basically, which is a little bit where we're at right now. The other piece to this was recognizing that, trying to make sure the town is ready for this grant, and that's largely in the scoring process to sort of make sure they're in a position to be successful. So the recommendations were for standardize the payback language and the triggers. That's a little bit of a moving target, because every surface transportation bill could alter that language. So we could be stuck in a cycle where every 4 or 5 years, or 5 or 6 years, depending, we may need to alter what that payback language looks like. And enhance early project vetting and scoping, kind of do a scoping plus effort. And again, that's the sole intent, to make sure that the towns are actually ready to pursue construction on a project. Actually implement pre-qualification and commitment mechanisms. So, one of the thoughts there would be to require an advanced scoping to even apply for a construction grant. Obviously, the downside there is it's another step, but in theory, that could yield some benefit in the long run. Formalize education and training and technical support. This is very similar to one of the recommendations in the previous report, to actually have an education component to this. Again, create very clear milestones for when the town would be liable for payback, whether it be right of way, preliminary engineering, etc. And then institutionalize the transparent consultation and appeals. Right now, the appeal process is pretty onerous. The way the statute reads is the town can appeal to the T board, and essentially, I believe the way the statute reads is that the T board has to issue a decision within 30 days. Now, with the T board being a quasi judicial entity, there's a lot that has to happen in that 30 days. And I won't get all the steps, but you have to have full discovery, you have to have a hearing, the T board needs to deliberate, then issue a decision. And anybody who's been through, a full discovery of a project, that's a fairly onerous and time-consuming process. And so aside from all of that being done in a very condensed time frame, and we just had one last year where essentially the town appealed week or two before Thanksgiving. So obviously the seasonal timing of that was not great. But what it actually did is it to some extent, by consolidating and condensing the time frame, you reduce the ability to communicate, try to negotiate, because everyone's got this arbitrary deadline. So again, trying to institutionalize a much more transparent appeal process that is workable to a productive outcome, not a timely outcome necessarily.
Go ahead.
That's interesting. So I was on the T-board and I think this is a new law because we never had anything.
I think it's been there for a while. What we're seeing is with the dramatic increase in inflation, these are now becoming more of an issue, right? I mean, pre-2022, projects being canceled and payback being an issue was almost non-existent.
Okay.
So with the passage of IIJA and the resulting, or not the resulting, but the corresponding inflation increase, we're seeing a lot more projects canceled. So depending on when you were in the T-board, it's very likely none of this ever occurred.
Right. And I was on for 7 years.
Yeah.
But that was before 2022. So interesting. So my other question was, what is the extent of this problem?
I don't have hard numbers. I'll just say I have seen basically towns either appeal or come to me for, a reconsideration. In the 2 or 3 years I've been in this position, half a dozen.
Okay. Are there going to be new ones, do you think? I mean, you're saying it's primarily from the IIJA.
Well, what IIJA did is the federal government relaxed the payback provisions, which created this discontinuity between the grant application, state statute, and the federal CFR. So again, not knowing what the next reauthorization bill is going to say, right now, at the very least, I think we need to define clearly and have some level of consensus as far as when you need to pay back what. Because right now, none of the documents that reference each other are consistent.
Okay. So do you need legislation to do that?
Potentially. Yep.
Okay.
Because right now, and again, I'll paraphrase, I believe the state statute says payback shall be done sort of in essentially consistent with the federal CFR. Our grant applications, I believe, again, I'm paraphrasing, basically say you will pay back, which was fine pre-IIJA because all those things are consistent. Post-IIJA, they're not. Now, there are still certain milestones even within IIJA, right? It's not a free-for-all. So, right-of-way and things like that still need to be paid back. But it did open up a bit of a gray area within preliminary engineering and construction as far as when you need to pay back the grant agreement if you terminate the project.
Okay, so last question. So can you, in your language, just say payback per the federal requirements?
I think we could. Yep.
Because that might make it a lot easier.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
not have to make.
Yeah. I think we could, but I think then, and this is where I'm like, one of the report notes was not to get lost in sort of the legalese of the CFR, and anybody who's ever read that is like kind of spun around on their head. So taking, volumes of CFR and distilling it down to, okay, here's a very discrete milestone. This is what your obligations will be. Here's another discrete milestone. Here's what your obligations will be. All in the background that the federal law effectively changes every 5 years.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that might be easier. It's challenging for you, but it's going to be complicated no matter what. And
Yeah.
if we try to have our legislation
Correct.
change every 5 years,
Right.
that
Yeah.
seems not good.
So those are the recommendations. I mean, I think from our perspective, right now, we want 3 outcomes. One, we don't want the state to be financially liable. When the feds say you need to pay something back, the towns need to be held to that standard, right? So we can't use T-Fund to pay back the federal government when a town cancels a project. We want this to be as administratively light as possible, right? We don't want to put a bunch of effort into administering this program. And for my own personal, or my sort of recommendation, is there needs to be some acknowledgement that if a town spends money and cancels the project, that is money that another town didn't get. And there just needs to be that acknowledgement that compassion for one town is in effect taking money from another town.
Okay.
All I have.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just
And
gonna,
then we're gonna move on because we're running late with.
Well, I can wait as Brian's
Go ahead.
topic a little bit.
oh yeah, I was just gonna ask to Senator Harrison's point earlier about what do you need in legislation to make these recommendations happen? Are you seeking to do stuff in the T-bill or DMV bill this year, or maybe this is a future conversation?
This is a future conversation. Both reports didn't provide specific actionable things that we're ready to move on. Under any circumstance, we still have some work to do with VLCT, VAPTA, the RPCs. So nothing is in the T-bill to act on these reports. There's nothing in the governor's recommend to act on these reports. We still have some more coordination to do. I mean, we don't get these much in advance of the legislature getting them, so we can't bake that into our budget.
Well, I appreciate the report, and I won't run to Damian Leonard then to try to track stuff. I'll wait for future information, so thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
I want to hear.
No, mine was just about payback on, to the feds on, Cirque Highway, rights away and stuff that we purchased, but that's a long story.
Yeah, that's a very long story.
We could wait on that.
Do a whole half hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, at least.
yeah.
The whole property disposition plan and.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you. So it looks like salt sheds and bike bed are 70-80% of the cancellation. So-
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, that's at the end.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
transportation alternatives program is right for that.
yeah, so that's good to know.
Is Jonathan,
We heard
And they're not-
years,
is he first?
we heard years
Yeah.
ago on that,
Okay.
because they got it, once they get into it, they figure out how it's done.
Yeah. Yeah,
Got it.
that's why
Really
we
is wise.
planning at a local level.
The reports that he was just discussing are on.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I got it. So that means, so I was gonna give you one, or I was gonna give you the printed version of those.
Okay, I only got one copy, but I'll.
I got that.
4 copies.
2 of each.
But if you references, I will.
I found the other one.
I'll think you need to turn it on for me.
Yeah.
So we're going to move into the next section. And this is kit cars. And John, you're on the screen and I think you're first.
That is correct. So thank you, Chair. For the record, my name is Jonathan Slayson from RSG. And getting the screen situated here. RSG was retained by the Agency of Transportation and particularly the DMV to conduct this legislative support study that focused on legislation that was part of the transportation bill last year about low volume vehicle manufacturing and the goal of inspecting, registering, and getting a VIN for these types of vehicles. With us in the room, we have many representatives of the DMV, and so we might go to them with any Q&A that I can't answer. All right. And with that, then I'll just dive in. I've got a handful of slides. Mindful of the time, I will move as fast as I think we need to, and then but feel free to interrupt. Right, you can see that. Great. All right, I'm staring at myself, so that's why I'm get rid of it. Okay, thank you. So I have 43 that we're here to talk about. Authorize the report that you all should have received. I've got one printout here. It directs the DMV to, in consultation with stakeholders, which we did, and along with ANR, who you'll hear from, I believe, after this testimony, to look at the process for issuing VINs and the opportunities to register the particular vehicle types, home-built vehicles, kit cars, and ultra-low volume motor vehicles. Now, immediately, We found issues with the terminology of these vehicles, and so we'll be mindful of trying to use the Vermont terminology that was set out in that transportation language. However, when we're talking about comparisons nationally, as well as with our federal partners, we all have different definitions of said vehicles. So we'll be really mindful of definitions, and please ask me if there's any clarifications required. The goals of the study, we're looking at how other states do similar exercises. And the goal was to identify a cost-effective process for certifying the safety of the vehicles and developing a streamlined process for VINs. Frankly, I think we have these processes largely available to us for these vehicle types. However, there's clearly some complications for one particular vehicle type, which I know will be probably the focus of the questions and particularly the next testimony. So the process itself carried out was research and literature review, looking at federal guidance, both from NHTSA, the Transportation Highway Transportation Safety Administration or agency, excuse me, don't know which one, and then the EPA, as well as other states. Then we conducted some stakeholder engagements. That was why the consultant was hired. We conducted conversations with DMV partners, as well as a representative of one of the vehicle types here in the state. There's a manufacturer that we engaged with. We tried to solicit additional engagement from a variety of stakeholders, both national and even the Vermont automotive enthusiasts. But unfortunately, there was just not an appetite to participate in these conversations. So we had, I thought, sufficient engagement to really dive in. And I think by the end, we all identified really the key issues. Then we prepared the report for you. So task one, the research. To distill this as simply as we can, we reviewed the numerous resources that I mentioned. There was clearly some definition challenges between state and federal levels, as well as mentioned other states. Namely, home-built vehicles is not a well-defined term. It's kind of a catch-all, and we need to be mindful of what we really intend to be defined by that. Kit cars itself is pretty much, it is a definition that's widely understood as to not being the whole manufactured vehicle, but it's a subset of parts, but with the intent that there is somebody making something, whether it's a chassis and a frame typically, and they sell that part to somebody who will then build the rest of the components from other purchased parts. Now, the challenge is whether they're using new manufactured parts or taking parts from salvaged vehicles. That's when you start to get in some gray area. There were provisions that were passed in the 2015 National Transportation Bill, the FAST Act, that attempted to create for the first time federal guidance, particularly around specialty vehicles and those that were manufacturing low volume numbers of vehicles. And this was where there's a 500 number and a 325 number. And the 325 number is what we're really centered around here in Vermont, because we've put that into our statute, in our legislation that authorized this study. In the federal guidance, there are available waivers or exemptions from certain federal processes exempt for those low vehicle manufacturers. Now, that's namely around safety. Where we run into challenges is the compliance with two entities. When we look at compliance of vehicle acceptance, we have safety and emissions, if I could just boil it down to be most simply. The safety side was really given some ability to pass and be exempt from crash tests and some very other expensive efforts for low volume manufacturers. The emission side was not given those same degree of waivers. So we have situations here in Vermont that the Clean Air Act prohibits the use of engines that are not certified. That is the process where either a state like California, which currently has the ability, the authorization to certify their own compliant engine designs, as well as the EPA. These are the only two entities in the United States that have the authority. Now, we know that there's some changes at the federal level, which may preempt California from doing those special certifications. But regardless, today, at this point, we have two entities, the EPA and California. Vermont is a state that follows the California protocols. So the Clean Air Act has then said you have to use certified engine designs There are two entities that approve those designs, EPA and California. There are other guidance that the Clean Air Act provides, which provides us this difficulty, but a situation about switching of engines. And when is an engine going to be replaced? And when can you replace certain configuration, certain parts of a vehicle to be still in compliance with its original certified design? This is where there's definitely a rabbit hole we could go down and spend a significant amount of time. And I also anticipate that it's going to be the emphasis of the testimony after us. So I'm going to stay high level now, and we can dive into Q&A if we want to go there. Safety inspections, as I said, are self-certified. These are for vehicles across the country, and they do not present a significant barrier. The existing state safety inspection process, which I know is a topic of conversation, we currently annually certify our vehicles for the safe operation on our roadways. And that is the requirement that we would impose on any of these vehicles, whether it's kit car, home built, specialty, low volume manufacturers, whatever you call it, it would be on an umbrella of mass produced as well as specialty produced. We inspect them annually for those purposes, whether they're safe to operate on Vermont roads. Vermont does already assign limited VINs. So the authorization that was asked is tell us how to do this. We already do it. Primarily, it's in a response of fixing an error or solving a problem. A vehicle comes to the DMV, either it's may have been put together with some older parts. It might have a VIN that was illegible at the moment, and we need to reconcile what was the original VIN, what was the intent. Sometimes you don't have those parts, and therefore there is a process that the DMV follows to provide a limited assignment of VINs. Now, VINs in a state, every state has the same ability to apply VINs for a vehicle. They are typically not recognized outside of that state that have been issued. And that's federally or accepted nationally standard, is that every state has their own VINs for these circumstances that arise. But it's not widely accepted, if not even exempted in the state's codes that they often don't recognize another state's VIN.
Thank you. That was, so as you were describing that process, I was like, but I don't think it is, so you can't drive it in New Hampshire.
You could drive it very
Okay.
much. You're not going to register it
Okay.
in that state and maybe not inspect it in that state
Okay.
if you do not have a VIN that state does not recognize.
Okay. So for example, my only understanding of this process is if you have an extremely old car that predates VINs. That's like the only example I've seen of this out in the wild. So for this case, you as a kit car manufacturer to use this process, your person would have to live in the state of Vermont if you sold the car to them, or you as the manufacturer would be the one getting the VIN.
No.
Okay.
You as the registrar of the vehicle
Oh.
and those who are attempting to then get the vehicle inspected for their use, they would go through. If I were an individual buying a kit car from various manufacturers around the country and assemble it in my garage in Vermont, I would then go to the DMV, and there is a process that they would review all of the receipts that I have collected and said, where do these parts come from? Are any of them stolen? Are any of them manufactured from X, Y, and Z location? Do I have a correct ownership of them? And the DMV then would go through a process of verifying that it looks generally manufactured correctly, safe to operate, the brake lights work, all the other bits and pieces are there physically. Then they would assign a VIN for that purchase. And the intent of Kit Car and the legislation that we have is that that car would be mine for the purposes that of my time of using it, running it on the state of in the state of Vermont.
But if I sold that vehicle,
The VIN would carry with the vehicle.
yeah.
And it's clearly not the intent to sell a large number of kit cars in the state of Vermont. There is a gray area of it's not
That was legal.
it's not illegal to sell the kit car that I would build. That is correct.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, but if you move to New Hampshire, you could probably get a VIN from New Hampshire following that same procedure, but it just would be a different VIN.
New Hampshire could potentially honor your VIN. They could also apply a state VIN.
Okay.
But every state is on their own rules for that process.
That's interesting.
Now, we discussed a few different states, New Hampshire just being ranked number one there, but we've looked at a handful of other states. Some of them were recommended by some of the stakeholder engagement that we conducted as to saying how other states participate in this process. It's very standard that states issue VINs for these types of vehicles and these circumstances that naturally arise when a VIN is illegible or that we need to fix something. What is not consistent across the different states is how they label and define these different vehicle types. The inspections, some states do not have these annual or biannual inspections. Sometimes the states only allow specialty vehicles, if I lump them all in, to be used for exhibitions, or they're not general on-road vehicles. So every state treats them very differently, and they have different levels of latitude in which they allow those vehicles to be inspected and registered. But the VIN is the first thing. That's kind of the easy answer. Everybody does it. The registration is pretty clear. It's got the definition of the vehicle, and then different vehicles are available for on-road or off-road or exhibition uses only. But then the inspection process, that's where it starts getting a little bit more nuanced, because some states have inspections, some states do not. Some states are California compliant on their emissions, and some states are less interested in understanding how they comply with federal emission standards. So briefly on stakeholder engagement, which I mentioned, you'll hear from some of the other stakeholders that we discussed with in the following set of testimony after me. But we had representatives from the Agency of Transportation, including the DMV. We had representatives of the ANR and the DEC. We also, namely Scott Roth, I will call him out by name, of Milton, Vermont. He is a manufacturer of a custom specialty vehicle that's based in Milton. And he was a great source of information as to how the industry operates nationally and what his goals as a small manufacturer in the state look like. And so we had individual conversations with each of these entities, as well as several roundtables where we were able to talk freely and discuss the various information that we collected as a consultant, but also was trying to confirm that we all understand, because there's some very difficult conflicting pieces of information that are out there. I think at the end of the day, I think it's fair to say that the report, I think, accurately captures what we heard. Also, I think fairly represents what we said. So I hope that the report was I think accepted by those stakeholders. It was shared with all the stakeholders, and nobody voiced a vote of dissent. So some insights and takeaways, because the next slide will be talking about some opportunities for you to consider. Clearly, the definitions of vehicles. We need to improve this. And this would be an opportunity at the VIN process. It would be a process at the registration stage, and clearly the inspection stage. We need to have a consistency across these different levels. What type of vehicle are we looking at? Is it a home-built car? We need to be really clear. What does that consist of? We've suggested that it may consist of old or previously used parts or new parts. It would be a mix of various attributes of vehicles. Kit car would be primarily made of newly manufactured parts, but it could consist of some older parts. When is that a home-built versus a kit car? Those distinctions need to be clear. We can talk about then what is a street rod, what is a specialty, which is a catch-all vehicle. We could do this in numerous different ways. We did not sketch out the various pros and cons of these. It would be really valuable to get some insight as to what is your appetite, as well as the DMV. We're looking at trying to standardize these things and not create too much ambiguity, but also provide the flexibility that people want to get what they want out of this. The difficulty then clearly is the specialty volume manufacturers, and how do we treat those that have an intent to sell? That is a very different intent, clearly, from the work that we did across the country and different states. States treat manufacturers very differently from those who are building an individual vehicle with not the intent to sell, with the intent to use as a personal vehicle. The intent is very much an important aspect of this. We mentioned that the application of VINs and the registration of kit cars and home builds is less legally difficult. And so we've said that really it's focused about the low volume vehicles and the manufacturers. We've said that the assignment of VINs, we're able to do it in most of the cases. It's limited in often the numbers. And so maybe the DMV could be provided if we want to do so. Right now, the state of Vermont has not, I think, had a problem with an excess number of vehicles coming to the DMV every year and asking for these VINs. As we said, it's been very much reactionary. But if there's ever a situation where that's becoming a problem, I would expect the DMV would come to you all first and ask for some help. Kit car. These are treated as pleasure vehicles in the inspection. This is where there's maybe some opportunities as well. The inspection process probably needs some updating, and that could be what defines a pleasure vehicle versus a specialty vehicle. Is it the difference of mass manufacturer versus specialty manufacturers? There is a process in the inspection guidance for a vehicle class called street rods. And that provides a different pathway for the inspection, particularly the initial inspection of a vehicle. So if you were to come out of state, come to Vermont with a 1949 street rod of a replica of a particular vehicle with existing VIN numbers because it was part of an older vehicle, but it's been amended. There is a process to take it to a set of inspection stations that has been approved by the state of Vermont to approve that vehicle would be roadworthy. That could be a similar process that could be taken for these other vehicle types, home built, kit car. Many other states actually do it in this manner, that not all inspection stations are created equal in the ability to inspect certain types of vehicle types. Clearly, there would have to be some approval of what that looks like. How are those stations selected? And are they geographically spread around the state to ensure that we're providing geographic equity? There are some other pieces of it that are just specifically noted as just not being well defined in the inspection. So if I were to pull up the registration page for a new vehicle, sometimes it's not 100% clear to me, the vehicle that I might have in my possession, which box does it satisfy? So there's some opportunities there. And so I've just defined for you how the street rod provides us an example about how some of these specialty vehicles could be inspected, particularly for their first initial inspection. And I think that's the clarity there, that ongoing annual inspections or biannual inspections could be carried out by other inspection stations. Now, moving on to the other pieces here, federal safety standards does not represent a significant issue. The FAST Act exempts manufacturers from going through the NHTSA safety process if you manufacture fewer than 325 vehicles, which aligned with our with our state legislation that you passed last year. The other home-built vehicles and kit cars, some of them are on existing chassis and existing frames, so they technically would have had some previous, if they were a mass-produced chassis, for example, they already went through some safety review. If it's a kit car, in essence, you're a low vehicle manufacturer at that point. And so you also are individually exempt from the NHTSA reviews. You're not going to manufacture this and sell it as a kit car builder. So it's a self-certification for those initial crashworthiness pieces. So NHTSA really has said it's a small vehicle numbers. We're not making you go through the very extensive crash processes. And so how do we confirm on the state of Vermont that it's roadworthy? That's the inspection process. I've already mentioned how the EPA and CARB in California, the California Air Resources Board, they are the two legally allowable entities to certify engine configurations. And I want to maybe just a point of education, and for me, it was a point of education, is that these certified engine configurations is not simply the tailpipe emissions or the quantity of CO2 or nitrous oxides being produced at the tailpipe.
It is the complete emissions of a vehicle, whether it's evaporative, and how the production of pollutants change during the process of converting gasoline into gas, air pollution gas, that it varies across the whole drivetrain and the whole emissions process. And so the location of fuse plugs, the location of how far is certain of the fuel tanks to the engines, the locations of how far does the evaporative process through the engine, that is what is being analyzed by the EPA and CARB. So it's not simply as saying, is the engine itself going to plug and play into this process? The engine is only one small component of the entire catalytic converter, the final tailpipe at the end of the day. So it's the soup to nuts at the beginning of the car to the end of the car. That is what's being tested. And therefore, it is very difficult to say that one car produces the same amount of emissions as the other vehicle. So that's what is a certified engine, is the complete, all of the parts that are part of the burning of fossil fuels. Clearly, electric engines don't have the same configurations. And so if you built your own electric car, you probably wouldn't have any of these same issues. Now, what causes, there's some now more difficult parts of this, is the topic of tampering, vehicle tampering, and engine switching. And Vermont, we only analyze the OBD port, the onboard diagnostic, for vehicles that are 16 years or newer. Before, if the car is older than that, we only do a visual inspection to say, are all the parts here? And we have to refer to some previously compliant design. So it's difficult to do that if you're only looking at a visual inspection. So it's difficult to, maybe even impossible, to fully verify that we have a compliant engine when the vehicle is over 16 years or older. The issue is that the Clean Air Act has specifically stated in many instances of notices of intent and clarifications of law that it is illegal to have an entity knowingly remove or render inoperative devices or components that affect the emissions controls. Now, that also, in most cases, means the installation of an engine from one vehicle to another, because it is so difficult to confirm that the whole certified engine design is completely compliant with the original design. And that is what makes the situation in Vermont difficult here, and in many other cases where if we have a low volume vehicle being made that is 16 years or newer, and if it doesn't have an EPA or a CARB certification, we have no way to say we agree as the state of Vermont in our inspection to say that we're certifying we agree that this is a certified engine. The OBD helps us verify that. Now, if the vehicle is 16 years or older, we're going to have even a harder challenge by then saying we can't physically see all the parts. We don't know everything where it's physically spaced to verify that it's in a compliant design. Now, I think there's some question, do we care? How does this affect Vermont's liability? The bottom line is that where does the liability go? As a Vermont inspection, we are saying that it ticks all of these boxes. At this point, our inspections it just says, are you compliant with the OBD? Or it looks similar enough to a previously designed, but nobody's holding Vermont liable. But it's going to be the federal government that's going to say, are we inspecting vehicles that are not compliant with federal Clean Air Act? Now, many other states do not have that. They are in that area as well, is that there is an agreement that no state has said we certify that the vehicle is compliant with the Clean Air Act. So we're not asking our inspection stations to, and other states are also not asking their inspection stations to. So it's somewhat of a self-certification issue here, that the vehicle owner says that I'm in compliance with the Clean Air Act, or we're just not asking to that level of detail. So the issue really is those older vehicles that don't have an OBD. When you do have an OBD, you have a certified design that you can compare the results of that computer diagnostic test to. So that way it helps you verify that things are in the proper order. So these provisions cover all the vehicle types. The low volume vehicle manufacturers, they must install the compliant engines in that configuration to be compliant with the federal law. The Vermont law doesn't stipulate anything particularly around that. The kit cars and home built cars must also have these compliant engines. They typically use a chassis that was part of a compliant design. So that's what makes manufacturers different from kit cars. So hopefully all of this is clear. I think I've got two more slides here quickly, and I know we're getting tighter on time, but I'm sorry, I have one more slide. Sorry. So the opportunities here, I think we've said the terms could be more explicitly defined. We have a VIN assignment process that could be used for these different vehicle types. There is a question as to whether we want to assign a VIN for a vehicle that may not be able to be inspected in the state of Vermont. There was, I think, a general suggestion in national precedents that if you have a moving vehicle that is eligible or able to be driven, we want to put a VIN on it. That way it has a unique ID, but there is a question to say, why go through the process of getting a VIN and registering something when it may not pass inspection? So I'll leave that up to you. There are examples out there from different states how to move forward. The state of California probably provides us the most robust example, where they do allow a limited number of waivers of vehicles that are not intended for manufacture. And to bring that into Vermont context, 500 vehicles in California would be somewhere around 12 vehicles per year that could be given a waiver by the state of Vermont. That waiver allows the vehicle owner to self-certify, saying, what year do I want to state my engine is compliant for? It could be the year that the vehicle most closely replicates, or it could be the year that the vehicle was technically assembled, or it was the year that the engine was made. You can choose, and therefore it gets a little bit around the federal stipulation that is it engine tampering if you choose to be prior to any of those certification years. If I were to go to California and said it's the design as of 2026, then I will need to show that I have a compliant engine design for the 2026 CARB certified vehicle. But I could go to California and say, I want to certify it for a 1960 vehicle, and therefore it doesn't have a certified design. So that's how California has been walking the fine line as to saying how they're compliant with the Clean Air Act.
And has there been any rulings by, have they been challenged on this?
I think your next testimony might have more clarity on that. We were unable to have a direct conversation with the SB 100. That's the process in California with the administrators there. They acknowledged that it's been the intent that because it's been primarily non-manufacturers and it's been existing certified designs, existing chassis, that they claim that it's been using old certified designs, and it doesn't appear to have been challenged by the federal government at this point.
So, go ahead, Pat.
Well, that was kind of I think you're getting at what I was going to ask. So you're basically saying if you self-testify that your vehicle is using 1960, you went back to 1960 technology here, that's good enough for your attestation. That is good enough
Well,
to get a VIN number for it.
Get a VIN number, yes.
Let me ask the question a little bit. So if what they're trying to replicate is a car from 1960, 65, someplace in there. And it's new. Has anyone gone in and said, well, you know, it's a similarity, but there's been no challenge of those cars that are really, they're trying to replicate to some degree, but not.
The law states that the owner is able to say it's a 1960s emissions design. And the state of California has given a waiver for a certain number of those vehicles.
And are these waivers for individuals? Are these waivers for small company that's done manufacturing?
Individuals.
Individuals.
Yep. An individual has to
So,
go.
and an individual can produce as many as 500?
325 without running into NHTSA safety rules. But you would be an individual that would have to then claim that you're manufacturing vehicles in your garage with not the intent to sell.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it would be an adventurous individual to build 325 vehicles in the state of California with kit cars and not try to sell them.
Okay. All right. So, but if we gave, you're going to be around here. Next. We're gonna, there'll be more questions.
Yeah. Well, hopefully,
I'm
then
This is not a proof to you. This is just a, can you move aside and somebody
That'd be
else?
fine. somebody can hit the hat posse.
Well,
Are we okay?
And we have another chair too.
That's right.
Yeah, he's not going anywhere for a while.
Great. Well, then would you like,
Yes.
Lieutenant Jeremy?
Good morning, Lieutenant Jeremy Sherman, Vermont DMV Enforcement Safety. So really, I think he went through, I was part of the study, the DMV representative on it. And he captured pretty much entirely what the DMV focus was. I would simply, I want your questions if you have them, but I would simply state that our process here in Vermont, we have processes for allowing a person, an individual to get a VIN. And generally DMV and most DMVs across the state is only to fix a problem. We're the only entity in a state that can issue a state assigned VIN. Now, as we talk about some of the language here, a label was part of this. That is, does this engine conform? And that really can only be issued by the EPA or through a CARB compliant process that California has in their system. So the DMV does not issue or has ever issued a label certifying an engine is compliant. It is pretty much on the self-certification of an individual that'll bring it. And our only method of testing would be through our inspection process, which currently in Vermont, we have the 16-year exemption. So the other piece I would clarify is on when we issue a VIN and we issue, let's say, a title to that vehicle, our process now is we don't give somebody an option to say it's a 1960. It becomes a 2026. And that's our process. Now, the VIN number that we assign is a Vermont specific, where we'll actually go out and we will rivet on a VIN number, a Vermont VIN number, and we will also do a hidden VIN. And that comes from the law enforcement side, is if another state says, hey, this little piece of aluminum foil that you riveted on the car isn't legit, we will have a case in which one of our folks authorized to do this would have gone and attached that, and we would have done some investigation regarding what was the true VIN or what was the VIN that was supposed to be on that vehicle. So it's a little bit different than what processes we're talking about here. And the last piece is a manufacturer has the ability to get a unique VIN number. And that is when you go to your car and it has that public VIN and it has that sticker when you open up the door, those are generally because a manufacturer has a certain world manufacturer identifier that describes what that 17 character VIN is. Now, I'm not talking about the really old stuff in which those are stuff we have to figure out, but everything new has a 17 character and it's designed that way for security and for law enforcement to determine, hey, was this thing altered? Has it been changed? Changing one of those numbers would mess up the whole VIN structure and we would be able to detect, is it a stolen vehicle? So there's a lot of those components that are built into this. Really, I mean, those are the only pieces that I would add. Our inspection process, if we are attaching it, is we will actually look not only the history of that vehicle, but we're looking at the chain of ownership. We're looking at if there's potentially any issues with that VIN, stolen parts. And we also, if it's somebody doing a kit car or a home built vehicle, we want to know what parts they put into that car and we want invoices and we want to be able to check, did they actually build this? So I think those are the only additions I would have if you have questions.
Is California the only state that's trying to get around this?
California is the only state that has a specific process to give the emissions waiver. Several states do not ask about emissions. So that's step one. Then majority of states simply require that you have a certified engine design. And there are a few states that allow you to choose whether you choose that certified engine year, the year that the engine was manufactured, or the year of the vehicle that you're attempting to replicate. So that is some selection that some states allow you to choose. But there's most of the states have restrictions on the use of those vehicles. Exhibition use only, shows, those types of things.
And here in Vermont, really antique vehicles or exhibitions, they're only supposed to be during going to a show, very limited. You get a reduction in your registration costs. Not a large population of folks that have those. And same with the home built vehicles. I don't have numbers, but I'd say on a yearly basis, we're well under 20 or 30 of these VINs that we might be actually assigning. It's not in the hundreds.
I would just say this is I don't know what our legislative path is. I think we all heard from the folks who made the cars, and we wanted to accommodate them as best we could so they could continue their business model. But it sounds like there's really not a clear pathway to do that. It's kind of my bottom line understanding of what you're describing. But perhaps I'm misunderstanding, or maybe there is a legislative change that we can make to accommodate it. But it seems like both of your presentations lead me to the answer is no, but.
I would say that the next presentation might add a little bit more to what those barriers are. We have existing processes here with DMV. The harder part is the definitions piece because we're not consistent. And really, when we're applying a certification as a state, what is the liability to that? What are, no other state other than California has gotten that exception. If we take that leap, we potentially could be inserting ourselves in a process that already exists on the federal and state to state level. I would think we would have to get some sort of California consistent process, and I don't know what that would look like.
Can I offer up
Go ahead.
one additional point of clarification? I think it's the distinction of manufacturing. Because SB 100 waiver in California does say the intent is not for manufacturers. It's those individuals that will be manufacturing their vehicles from kit cars with not the intent to sell. So I think the intent, again, differs here. There is no state that would allow a custom manufacturer to register and inspect, get their vehicles sold in the state, in the US without a certified engine design.
Okay, well, that's right there.
And that engine design can be a manufacturer, a current manufacturer like a Chevy or a big one, will sell somebody an engine in that design. But in order to put that in and have it be compliant, as he said in his presentation, all those parts need to be in a certain configuration. And if it's moved just an inch or two, it's no
Well,
longer
and
compliant.
I hear all of this and certainly the car that we've seen, and we might as well just talk about the case that they made 6 cars.
Yeah.
And so we really are talking about a very limited number that we would, we're looking to, at least what we're doing is exploring if they should stay here or whether or not they should leave, and they are making, these are their.
So it may
And
be,
then I want to take 5 minutes break and then we'll take this back up. Right.
so you want me to ask a
No,
question?
go ahead.
So is there a state that's using California, certification? So not even like, Michigan?
No other state has adopted the SB 100 program as far as we're aware.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. And then we're gonna take a 5-minute break because the senator from Washington needs a break.
No, I'm okay right now.
Okay,
You gonna stick around for the
Yes.
rest of the house?
can we take be back here at 5 minutes after?